Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Okay. So it is July. It is July, which means we've made it through the first full 6 months of 2025. And around the 6-month mark every single year, a lot of new books start getting announced. So at the very beginning of the year in January, I do a series of lists of my most anticipated reads coming out in 2025, and then by the time I get to the summer, there are so many more books that have come out, and so I'm excited. We're going to talk, I think, about my first extra 8 books, and then I'm going to do a part 2 with another 8 books, because I have a lot. And I'm also going to be including some nonfiction this time, because I've been listening to audiobooks to try and get more into nonfiction, and it's been something that I've been really enjoying, and there's some spooky nonfiction reads that are coming out soon, so we're going to talk about those as well. Alright, so before we dive in, if you haven't seen parts I think 1 through 4 or 1 through 3, I don't even remember how many I did at the beginning of the year, they will be linked down below. I've already read a lot of the books that I chatted about in those, and I'm planning on hopefully getting through all of them eventually. But let's hear what other exciting books are coming out this year. So most of these are going to be the premise that I get from Goodreads. I found out about pretty much all of these, I think, from Read Jump Scares, that blog. It's a really very useful, informative blog. It always tells you the latest releases that are coming up. And I'm really excited. So my first most anticipated book, part 2, it's actually a book that is already out. It came out earlier this month. It came out on July 8th. I've never heard of this author before, but I just really liked the premise. Don't love the title, but I saw it in the Strand, and then it keeps popping up on things, and it's released by Poison Pen Press, which is just Darcy Coates' go-to publisher, and so I really enjoy that company, so I'm excited to hear and read more about this. And that is How to Survive a Horror Story by Mallory Arnold. Again, an author I have never heard of before, but this really intrigued me. So here's the premise. 7 authors enter the manor. Can they survive the story within? When legendary horror author Mortimer Queen passes, a group of writers find themselves invited to his last will and testament reading, expecting a piece of his massive fortune. Each have their own unique connection to the literary icon, some known, some soon to be discovered, and they've been waiting for their chance to step into the author's shoes for some time. Instead, they arrive at his grand manor and are invited to play a game. The rules are simple: solve the riddle and progress to the next room. If they don't, the manor will take one of them for itself. You see, the Queen estate was built on the bones of Mortimer's family, and like any true horror story, the house is still very hungry. With the clever locked room thrills of everyone in my family has killed someone, with the ghostly horror of the fall of the House of Usher, How to Survive a Horror Story is a bright, biting thrill ride that begs us to contemplate how the best horror stories come to be. Woo! Okay. Super cute concept, I think. I think it could definitely lean more cozy horror. Really excited to kind of dive into that and see what that is. Okay, next up, this is actually a short story collection, and I don't know if I'm going to get to it right away, but I'm really interested in the premise. And it's called The End of the World as We Know It, New Tales of Stephen King's The Stand. Now, it is edited by Christopher Golden and Brian Keene, which are 2 authors that I quite like. And it does have an introduction by Stephen King himself, so it's definitely something that he is very on board with. This is going to be 800 pages, and it is released on August 19th. And it says, this is very long, an original short story anthology based on master storyteller Stephen King's #1 New York Times bestselling classic, The Stand. Since its initial publication in 1978, The Stand has been considered Stephen King's seminal masterpiece of apocalyptic fiction, with millions of copies sold and adapted twice for television. Although there are other extraordinary works exploring the unraveling of human society, none have been as influential as this iconic novel. Generations of writers have been impacted by its dark yet ultimately hopeful vision of the end and new beginning of civilization. And its stunning array of characters, now for the first time, Stephen King has fully authorized a return to the harrowing world of The Stand through his original short story anthology as presented by award-winning authors and editors Christopher Golden and Brian Keene. Bringing together some of today's greatest and most visionary writers, The End of the World as We Know It features unforgettable all-new stories set during and after, and perhaps long after, the events of The Stand. Brilliant, terrifying, and painfully human tales will resonate with readers everywhere as an essential companion to the classic best-selling novel. Featuring an introduction by Stephen King, a foreword by Christopher Golden, and an afterword by Brian Keene, contributors include Wayne Brady. Is that the comedian? and Maurice Broaddus, Poppy Zebright, Summer Cannon, C. Robert Cargill, Nat Cassidy, V. Castro, Richard Chismar, S.A. Cosby, Tananarive Dew, and Stephen Barnes, Meg Gardner, Gabito Iglesias, Jonathan Jans, Alma Katsu, Caroline Kepnes, Michael Carita, Sarah Lankin, Joe R. Lansdale, Tim Levin, Josh Mallerman, Ronald Malfi, Umas T. Malik, Primi Muhammad, Cynthia Paleo, Haley Piper, David J. Shao, Alex Segura, Brian Smith, Paul Tremblay, Catherine M. Valente, Bev Vincent, Katrina Ward, Chuck Wendig, Rath James White, and Rio Yours. That's a lot of authors. And that's a lot of authors that I really, really like, writing about my favorite author in his world. So I don't know if I'm going to read 800 pages of a short story collection, but I might pick that up and read the stories by the authors that I really, really like in there. So we will see. I know that was a very, very long description. Okay. Next up, and also coming out on August 19th, this is my first nonfiction read on this list, and that is Your Favorite Scary Movie, How the Scream Films Rewrote the Rules of Horror by Ashley Collins. And it says, the ultimate story of the Scream movie franchise, featuring interviews from more than 80 key players and an in-depth exploration of the creation and legacy of the films that revived dying genre in your favorite scary movie. Entertainment journalist Ashley Collins examines the making and impact of the Scream films, with behind-the-scenes insight from cast, creators, and crew, as well as sharp analysis on how the movie's special blend of gruesome violence and humorous self-awareness rewrote the horror playbook. The intimate and thorough history includes brand new interviews from Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Kevin Williamson, Skeet Ulrich, Matthew Lillard, Jack Quaid, Parker Posey, Hayden Panettiere, Jasmine Savoy Brown, Mason Gooding, Radio Silence, Roger L. Jackson, and so many more. Perfect for fans of Scream, horror lovers, and cinephiles. This is the story of how a little movie about a ghost-faced killer terrorizing high schoolers overcame countless obstacles to become an historic success that still has audiences screaming to this day. I am so excited to read interviews by the original cast. I think that just sounds so cool. I'm so happy that, like, some of these, like, iconic horror films are finally getting the respect and treatment of some other, like, film greats. Like, you read so much about the making of, like, Hitchcock and all of these, like, amazing films that have stood the test of time, but they center on drama and comedy and never around horror. So I am so excited to read something like this, especially being around the Scream franchise, which is probably my favorite of the horror franchises. So super, super excited for that. Okay, next up. On August 26th, my girl is back. I know I haven't read her earlier release this year, but I really don't want the Gravekeeper series to end, so I like keep putting it off. But we get a new read from Darcy Coates, and that is called How Bad Things Can Get. How Bad Things Can Get. I am so excited. Again, August 26th, 416 pages, so a long one for Miss Coates. And it says, it was supposed to be the party of the century. Miles of idyllic white sand beaches, lush jungle foliage, and a dark legend nobody dreamed might be all too true. When an online influencer and several hundred of his most loyal fans land on Prosperity Island, the plan is simple. 5 days of elaborate games, drinking, and suntanned fun. A week in paradise should have been a welcome respite. The only survivor of an infamous cult, Ruth wants nothing more than to keep her head down and not draw attention. She spent decades outrunning her blood-soaked childhood, and her identity is closely held secret. But then the true history of the island is revealed, along with its sinister connection to Ruth's past. As guests go missing and games turn deadly, Ruth and the rest of the attendees are forced to question whether they've really been invited to paradise or whether something much darker and far bloodier is waiting for them just beyond the bonfire's light. This sounds so unlike Darcy Coates, and I get really excited when she jumps out of her comfort zone of cozy horror. I'm sure this is still going to have cozy moments, but I like seeing her expand her brand. I really hope we continue to get more like haunted house ghost stories, but I do love when she pushes into new styles of writing, so very, very, very excited for that. All right, next up, we have another nonfiction read. So many. And this is coming out on September 2nd, and this is Ghosted, A History of Ghost Hunting and Why We Keep Looking by Alice Vernon. And it says, a social, historical, and scientific exploration of ghost hunting, and why our fascination with the paranormal is as timeless as the ghosts we hope to find. The history of ghosts is ancient, but the history of active ghost hunting is relatively recent, and investigations into the paranormal have developed hand in spirit hand with scientific discoveries from radio waves to smartphone apps. Now more than ever, we want to find our own ghost. Is it to help process grief? become influencers, or ease our fears of death? Ghosted follows the journey of paranormal investigations from the Victorian era to the modern day, examining how our fascination with ghost hunting has changed alongside technology and culture. Where we once gathered around tables observing and recording every movement of the medium, we now take electronic equipment and app-laden phones around haunted locations to catch ghosts digitally. Where theaters and concert halls held sold-out performances by conjurers recreating the tricks of fraudulent mediums, we now delight in picking apart and exposing the evidence presented on reality television programs. In this book, Alice Vernon embarks on a journey to encounter ghosts, traveling to some of the UK's most haunted locations and encouraging readers to interrogate their own skepticism and belief. Ghosted examines what we are looking for, why we are looking for it, and why we have never given up the ghost. Ah, sounds so fun. Okay, so yeah, really on this nonfiction kick, so we will see how that goes for me. But I'm really excited to read more books like that, so very excited for that. Okay, and I think actually all of my nonfiction works are on this part of the list. There's only 3 of them, so don't worry. But the next one is coming out on September 2nd. And this is Screaming and Conjuring, The Resurrection and Unstoppable Rise of the Modern Horror Movie by Clark Collis. And it says, as featured in People, Variety, Entertainment Weekly, New York Post, Fangoria, and more, it's a lot, blockbuster box office critical acclaim and Oscars recognition. From Get Out and Megan to The Substance and Sinners, the horror genre is enjoying a glorious and gory golden age. Screaming and Conjuring details the films and frights that led to this extraordinary renaissance, from the release of the groundbreaking Scream in 1996 to the arrival of 2013's The Conjuring. Aha, there's the name. Which spawned a multi-billion-dollar franchise. Written by entertainment journalist Clark Collis, author of You've Got Red on How Shaun of the Dead was brought to life. This exhaustively researched book is the first in-depth examination of a remarkably fertile and influential time for big screen horror. Wes Craven's Scream was followed by a flood of classic terror tales, such as The Blair Witch Project, The Sixth Sense, Final Destination, The Others, Pan's Labyrinth, 28 Days Later, Resident Evil, Saw, Hostel, Paranormal Activity, and Insidious. This comprehensive history covers the often difficult and torturous making of all these films and many more, giving readers the exclusive lowdown on productions which were often as intense as the horrifying sights that ended up on screen. Screaming and Conjuring features recollections from a host of genre icons, including actors Jamie Lee Curtis of Halloween, Neve Campbell of Scream, directors Eli Roth of Hostel and Sam Raimi of Evil Dead and Drag Me to Hell, and legendary makeup effects artist Greg Nicotero, The Mist and the Walking Dead. The book also includes 200 production stills, film posters, and rarely seen images. Oh, this might not be an audiobook moment for me. I love film history. I don't know if you've seen on this channel, but I like reading meta books on how to make horror movies. I talk a lot about horror movies on this channel. I talk about books that make me feel like I'm watching a horror movie. I talk about movies that make me feel like I'm watching books. I think that horror entertainment goes hand in hand, so I'm really, really excited to read something like this. Okay, next up, we have, on September 2nd as well, it's going to be a big day, guys, Spider to the Fly by J.H. Markert. So I discovered J.H. Markert a couple years ago by literally buying one of his novels literally based on the cover, and I really like his kind of fantasy realm that he has created, almost like his own universe, the way that Stephen King has created his own universe of things and how things interact and work within one another, but also his love of kind of creating these like detective mysteries. I feel like he has a really good formula for what he writes, and I really enjoy reading his writing. So it says, a true crime author helps in the desperate hunt for a killer in this dark and twisted thriller from the devious, inventive horror author that Peter Ferris calls the clear heir to Stephen King. Perfect for fans of cat and mouse serial killer thrillers like The Butcher and the Wren and The Jigsaw Man. Ellie Isles first became obsessed with the I-64 murders when she saw her own face on one of the victims. Identical to every detail, the woman wasn't her, but she could have been. Compelled to discover the story of her doppelganger's death, Ellie wrote a best-selling true crime book about the serial killer dubbed The Spider. 4 years later, the Spider still hasn't been caught, and his victim count is climbing. Many of the bodies remain unidentified, but with Ellie's online network of true crime followers, that's slowly changing. Together, they've pooled information to create a massive database that tracks people at risk of becoming Jane and John Does, the homeless, the drug addicted, and the downtrodden, with the hopes that if they become victims, they might at least be identified. Now that Ellie has successfully identified multiple victims, the law enforcement task force tracking down the Spider pulls her in to help, and after Ellie's therapist is arrested for the murders, she's more determined than ever to help catch the Spider. With striking prose and horror flair, Spider to the Fly is an engrossing serial killer thriller perfect for fans of The Whisper Man. Ooh, okay. I wonder if this one is going to lean away from the supernatural. He really likes to play with the supernatural in his stories, and like I've accepted that. But it'd be really cool to see him write just like a straight up horrific thriller mystery. I would love that so much. Okay, last one for just this list. There will be a part 2. And this is coming out September 9th. I can't believe we're saying it, but we are going to talk about We Are Always Tender with Our Dead by Eric LaRocca. Now, I just did a whole video reviewing At Dark I Become Loathsome. I took the plunge. I read Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. I really want to read more from LaRocca just to see if I like him as an author or not. I see these glimmers of hopes in things that he writes. Don't always love his books, but I want to see if he is getting there. He's a newer author, so I really want to see. All right, so this says, Michael McDowell's Blackwater meets Clive Barker's The Great and Secret Show in the disturbing first installment of a new trilogy of intense, visceral, beautifully written queer horror set in a small New England town. Don't love a series, but maybe it'll pull me in. A chilling supernatural tale of transgressive literary horror from the Bram Stoker Award finalist and Splatterpunk award-winning author of Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. I cannot speak today. The lives of those residing in the isolated town of Burnt Sparrow, New Hampshire are forever altered after 3 faceless entities arrive on Christmas morning to perform a brutal act of violence, a senseless tragedy that can never be undone. While the townspeople grieve their losses and grapple with the aftermath of the attack, a young teenage boy named Rupert Cromwell is forced to confront the painful realities of his family situation. Once relationships become intertwined and more carnage ensues as a result of the massacre, the town residents quickly learn the true retribution is futile. Cruelty is earned, and certain thresholds must never be crossed no matter what. Engrossing, atmospheric, and unsettling, this is a devastating story of a small New England community rocked by an unforgivable act of violence. Written with visceral intensity and profound eloquence, LaRocca journeys deep into the dark heart of Burnt Sparrow, leaving you chilled to the bone and wanting more. I'm very intrigued by the concept of small town horror. I feel like Eric LaRocca usually writes horror from the perspective of like 2 different people interacting, and all 3 things that I have read from LaRocca kind of have that formula. So I'm really interested to see a work where we have ideally a lot more characters that are also interacting in person and not just through messaging. So we decided to give him a chance again. I don't think I like a lot of LaRocca's work. I don't think any of the books really have like wowed me or stuck with me, but there's something there that I feel like there's a really interesting and good author waiting to emerge and like just blow us out of the water with what he can do. We're not there yet, but I'm really interested to see where Eric LaRocca goes. So I am definitely going to be picking that up. I have a feeling it's going to be really extreme and gross, and there's going to be body horror, and it's going to have some like weird brutal scene that makes me uncomfortable. It goes on for way too long. It's like all of his scenes have, or all of his stories have, but we'll get there when we get there. In September, apparently. Maybe I'll read it around Christmas time because, you know, Christmas, but that might be a huge downer if, like, it sounds like a downer book, as his books tend to be. Anyways, that is part 1 of my revisiting the books I am interested in reading that have been recently released or announced for 2025. Definitely check out part 2. That'll be up really soon, and then hopefully as the year goes on, I will get to read and review all of these books on the list. Anyways, I'm trying to post 2, sometimes 3 times a week, and if you enjoyed these videos, please hit the like, subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.